Lori Knowles is a writer, reporter, and author inspired by white snow, blue water, and beautiful words. She spent most of her travel writing career working for newspapers and ski magazines, but holds a special spot in her heart for Muskoka. Lori's latest project is an online magazine called muskokastyle.com, and her first full-length novel, Summers with Miss Elizabeth, is currently seeking a publisher. Lori is now working on a second novel titled Winters My Father Gave Me. What follows is an excerpt from that manuscript. Lori Knowles.
This is chapter 2 from Winters My Father Gave Me. I introduced myself to my father on the 21st of September in my 13th year. I know the date because it was snowing in the mountains and I'd never seen snow or mountains. When a place changes your life, you remember first meeting it. He was standing on the porch of his cabin, 4,000 square feet, 3 floors, projection room in the basement, and still, Bill Llewellyn called it a cabin. There was a roof over the broad porch and a cord of wood piled in one corner, neat, flat edges, not a stick out of place. We stood in a face-off, me trying to hide my shivers because I didn't have a coat, and Lou with a newspaper in one hand, his readers halfway down his nose, and an expression not surprised exactly, more curious. It's strange seeing a film star for the first time in the flesh, even stranger when it might be your father. Lou wasn't as tall nor as imposing as he was on screen, but he was just as handsome, even with those glasses. Same brown eyes and sweep of honey pale hair that Barbara Maitland moved across his forehead in that scene that still makes my mom's friends swoon, even though the movie's so old. It was about 7 at night, and the light was fading behind Juniper Peak, visible from Lou's front porch. There was a glow coming from inside the cabin that haloed Lou from the back, making him look like a god or something. He was kind of scary, but still, I stood my ground. "I'm Lucy, your daughter," I said. "And don't tell me I'm not, because you know it's true." He drew up one corner of his mouth. I knew that look too. I'd seen every one of his films, and there were no bad ones. He said, "Hello, Lucy." Hello, Lucy. I found out later he knew I was coming. My mother dug his agent's phone number out of her shoulder bag and called him, probably from a payphone on PCH with her boyfriend Nick waiting in his Chevy. She told Marty to get a message to Lou. Nobody calls a film star straight on. That Marty took her call says something about her mother. Men never forget Marilyn Brown, even though she lives in a trailer now. So Marty called Lou, told him I was coming, and that I was convinced I was his kid. That call must have surprised my dad, as till that moment he never even knew I existed. So by the time I introduced myself to him on the front porch next to Juniper Peak, he wasn't surprised. Or maybe he was just acting. I hadn't meant it as running away. I didn't do it because I was unhappy. Going down the coast with my mom, learning to surf, moving in and out again with whatever boyfriend. The latest being Nick, who was about as vacant and run down as a motel on Highway 1, but still harmless. Going to Juniper had been a mission, carefully planned, spurred by a crummy conversation with Tammy Duke, a girl who sat in front of me in math class and who I didn't like much, but for some reason was always trying to impress. In a moment I wish now I could take back, I told her my father was Bill Llewellyn, and she laughed. She laughed. Thinking back, it was more of a sneer. "Yeah, right," she said, "and my dad's Dennis Hopper." I'd never been told who my dad was. My mom wouldn't talk about it. She said it was during her free love period, even though I wasn't conceived in the summer of 1969, and anyway, it seemed to me her free love period was still going. But I connected the dots when I saw Bill Llewellyn at the Renegade at the Gaiety, a rep theater where your feet stuck to the floor because of all the spilled soda. It felt surreal, not my feet getting stuck, but recognizing my father. The camera came up close to his face and his soft eyes were squinting in the sun. Most women saw a soulful man they wanted to fix and take home, but I just saw my dad. It helped that my mother kept photos of them kissing and walking on the beach and stuff in those flip albums she kept in a secret pocket of her suitcase. She wasn't a believer in holding on to mementos, but whenever we moved on to a new man on the California coast, she never left behind those photos. So when Tammy Duke laughed at me in math class, I just knew I had to go find him. I spent Saturdays in the library reading old LA Times. There were a ton of stories on him. The fact that Hollywood's most favorite leading man left it all behind to move to a cabin in the mountains to build a ski area, well, that was the thing the press found both romantic and really sad. Mostly they didn't get it. He hadn't even taken an actress with him, though he probably could have. "He'll be back," Marty told the reporter. "Lou was born in Malibu and raised in Hollywood, and his next picture will be bigger than the last." But Lou hadn't been back. I read that his resort, always losing money, was in a place called Juniper. At the Greyhound terminal, I stood on a bench that looked like a church pew to get up high enough to study the bus map. There was Juniper, surrounded by tiny black triangles, which my geography teacher said meant mountains. I bit my lip. It was such a long way from the coast. The ride would take forever, and I'd probably throw up as I was known to get bus sick. But then there was Tammy Duke's sneer laugh in my ears, and I just couldn't let her show me up, even though I thought it stupid she changed the spelling of her name to T-A-M-I with a heart over the I. I had to prove once and for all that this Lou actor was my father. I lifted $50 from the jar in the back of Nick's kitchen cupboard, a thing I'm not proud of, as Nick had never done anything to me, and $50 was a lot to him. I threw a few things in my mother's suitcase, the same one with the album. I wrote a note saying, "Don't wait up, I'm going to find my dad," and I bought a one-way ticket to Juniper. No one at the booth even asked if I was old enough. Back on the porch, after I told him I was his kid, Lou creased those famous eyes and studied my face, tilting his head a little. It's not easy being stared at by someone famous. Doesn't happen often. I stared at him right back. "Well," he said finally, "I guess you better come in then." He turned and walked towards the glow. I hesitated, but only for a second, and then I dragged me and my suitcase behind him. It was warm inside the cabin, if you can call it a cabin. The room was ginormous, with beams and big windows and a stone fireplace I could fit my mom's VW right into. A man and a woman stood by the staircase, waiting. The man was husky with a silver beard, and the woman was tall, wearing breeches and a fierce expression. "This is Hutch, and this is Hazy," Lou said, walking past them. "They keep the place up for me, do a good job of it, too." He sank into a leather chair under a portrait of a woman on a horse. He opened his newspaper, and then he looked at all of us over the rims of his glasses, not surprised we were still watching him, as he's used to people watching him. "Hazy's got a room ready for you," he said, matter of fact. "And Hutch here, he makes hot chocolate." He snapped the newspaper open. "What do you think, Hutch? The kid looks like she could use one." And just like that, my first winter with my father started. "Ha! Told you, Tammy."